Never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll 'em, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, the bold taste of a Southern legend.
Outkick 360 rolls on. Glad you're with us. Chad, the terrible earthquake that ripped through Turkey, 21 days after they're going through, they're trying to clean up, and they found this horse alive underneath the rubble after 21 days underneath the buildings and just all the just disaster efforts. They're trying to find people, and they end up finding the horse that was alive 21 days later. It's crazy.
This is a remarkable story. Was the horse, I'm guessing, kind of protected by a structure over it? That
It had to be,
the whole
right?
time?
And
yeah.
then they had recent rainfall. So the thought was like maybe the animal is able to drink water somehow during this time. But it reminded me back in 2013 of the guy who was on the oil tanker, I believe. And I think there were 12 people on the ship. It capsizes, and it sinks to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And he is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean alive in this air pocket in a ship. And divers are trying to come down and, find the wreck and assist with whatever they can bring back to the surface. And he reaches out and grabs one of the divers, and they found out that he was still alive.
For how long?
That is crazy.
How many days?
2.5 days. 2.5 days at the bottom of the ocean.
This is nightmare fuel on both sides. For the diver,
Yeah.
who's going down, and an arm reaches out and grabs him that he thinks, I'm sure, is dead 2.5 days later.
But
and
think
then
about
for this guy for 2.5 days, I mean, I cannot. It just gives me the willies thinking about being in that situation for that long and just knowing the inevitable.
Yeah.
The inevitable for him was he gets rescued and he lives, which is insane. But to me, the inevitable is I'm going to suffocate or
run out of air.
drown, or it's
Well,
going to go down. I'm going to drown.
Or you're going to be eaten.
Yeah, or a
Because
shark's going to come and get me.
The quote was, at one point he heard a sound that terrified him. He said it was the, quote, bite of fish eating something in the vessel. He could hear that.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, that is nuts. Again, this was a decade ago, but when I saw the story out of Turkey, I'm like, this reminds me of Harrison Okene, who survived, again, craziness.
There was that movie with Ryan Reynolds. I think the name of it was Buried, maybe, where the whole movie is him buried alive. And it's him, getting his cell phone out while he still had battery and doing all these different things. And it's a very claustrophobic movie. This would be the sequel if someone had a movie about this gentleman.
Well, and then
in this situation.
Then you think you're hallucinating because he's in the pitch black. The photo that we have of him is the diver using the light that he has to search. He's in the pitch black, and he finally saw this light coming towards him up through the water. And that's when he realized, that's someone else. He thought it was another survivor of the wreck because he didn't know at the time how, the fact that he was at the bottom of the ocean. He thought the entire crew had survived, and they were waiting on rescue.
Fun story. Good story.
Yeah, I don't want to relive that.
Let's move along because I don't want to sit and think about that. Again, both sides, diver or the man who was stuck there for 2.5 days. I'm also thrilled about the horse. I don't have a problem with horses. Dogs, birds,
You're allergic
sure.
to them, though. I am.
Yeah, well, I'm allergic to every animal with fur, so that's no difference.
Same,
but I actually,
for the most part.
I think the horse is a very regal, beautiful creature.
The NFL has done the right thing. They have reinstated a wide receiver to the league. Calvin Ridley is now free to join the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, well, we haven't done the right thing as a country by letting Djokovic play. Well, details next on the vaccine status and why he had to pull out of a tournament this week. The draw is today. Headlines coming up.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming on. And so much to talk about. And I kind of just want to dive right in as somebody that I watch your show, and these are conversations that you have had in the past couple of months. And, NIL is such a game changer when it comes to different aspects of college sports. And we're starting to see that influx when it comes to boosters, people around the program, how schools are navigating. Before we get into the inner wellings of it, what's been your thoughts on how this has played out over the last 2 years?
Is an implosion waiting to happen. Kind of what I said a few years before it started. I came on someone, I think I was on McAfee when I said about 3 years ago, I'm like, listen, the NIL should not be conducted this way. It should not be formatted this way. It should not be constructed this way or created this way. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's going to end up imploding college football, and it will be the end of junior college. It'll be the end of high school recruiting. It'll be the end of a lot of this stuff compiled with transfer portal. So I say you put these two things together, you're gonna kill JUCO, which 3 years later, right now to this day, we just had our second California JUCO fold. Kansas JUCOs are not doing well, like at all. Mississippi is not doing well at all. Resource-wise, you're not going to have the resources you once have. You've already seen the entire state of Arizona lose junior college football. So, like, you're having this influx that people don't realize that has a direct impact just from the correlation of these things. And people don't really look into it deep because they just want to see what's on the surface. They only look through the optical lens of things. They don't really dive into anything. And it blows my mind that we're in this analytical world and we don't look into the data and the analytics. We just want to talk on Twitter because all people on Twitter know all things, right? So when I'm sitting there talking and I'm sitting there looking into it and I'm like, well, look, what they should have did was, by the way, a good friend of mine growing up with Ed O'Bannon, he's the one that started this whole thing with the NCAA NIL deal. We played high school basketball together and Charles and Ed, and he started this thing. And it's crazy, right? It's a slap in the face. NCAA, we already know what that stands for, non-caring assholes of America. They basically pay everybody like $11, right? 100,000 people get paid like $11. Oh, we won. Well, you didn't really win. You created this NIL deal, which basically is for the 1%ers, Trey. 1%ers. Yeah. Think about it. Everyone thinks on the outside looking in that these kids are getting millions. No, 1%, if that, I would actually say 0.001% is actually getting the millions. The rest of the percentage, the 99.9% of the kids are average NIL dollar. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's $300.
Just like that, second hour is here. Glad you're with us. Outkick 360 with Hutton and Withrow. 6th and Peabody location, Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine made here daily. We've got Mike Renner coming up from Pro Football Focus. He'll join us in about 20 minutes. We'll recap the NFL Combine, the top storylines, including Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and more. Chad, we have Josh Pate in an hour. Looking forward to that conversation.
Always good.
From Pate State. And then A.J. Perez, front office sports senior reporter on the Washington Commanders. Sale or not? We'll find out from Perez. That's coming up in hour number 3. Chad, Calvin Ridley is back. He's been reinstated back into the NFL after gambling on NFL games after a 1-year suspension. And today the NFL made it official. They could have done this last month if they would have chosen to do it on the day he was eligible to apply to be reinstated, which he did. But he's a former first-round pick of Atlanta. They traded him, of course, to Jacksonville. And now he's another weapon that will be on the field for Trevor Lawrence in 2023. The right move, and the suspension was way too long for the $1,500 roughly that was wagered. And here's the thing. It's not because of the fact that he wagered or participated in gambling for the NFL on NFL games. It's just period, point blank. You can't do it on anything if you're a paid employee of the league in some way.
Was he betting against his team? Did we ever find out? Were there prop bets? I think there was some prop bet stuff, right?
I think the props all had to do with if he did it with the Falcons, it benefited the Falcons. Guys. And he was out for the games that he was wagering on. And the others was like a parlay, I believe, with other games.
It's one of those stories that just makes me think, just why is that? with it. Because here's what I mean.
Yeah.
There's this long-standing thing that if you do anything that's remotely involved with gambling on sports and you're in the sport, well, that's a no-no, and you're done at that point. Doesn't matter if you bet against your team, for your team, whatever. If you're actively involved in a pro sport and you gamble in any way, that's going to be really bad news. I understand the idea behind that, and you don't want the look of any impropriety, but there has to be some nuance here. You're not on the team. You're not outwardly betting against your own team, so you're not affecting the outcome of the game. Let's start there. Not playing, you're not negatively affecting the outcome of the game. You're not shaving points. You're not intentionally trying to lose. The amount of money wagered is pretty low considering what money is wagered in America at $1,500 for a guy with his salary as well. You got to put all those factors in, Hutton, and say, maybe a year is too much. Maybe a less suspension than that. Let's really look at it. Let's weigh this against, I don't know, some domestic violence things that have happened in the league, some gun charges, all these other awful things that go on. Let's look and see what's really fair and not just throw a blanket over anything involving sports wagering and say, oh, no, that's the unforgivable sin. That's a no-no. You're out for a year for doing that, especially when you partner with sports books now.
So what he did, their bets were made online with Hard Rock Sportsbook while he was away from the team due to injury. He had 3 multi-leg parlays, and some of those bets included at least one NFL game. I think it was the Dolphins and someone maybe. At least one NFL game has been reported. And then he had a 3-team, a 5-team, and an 8-team parlay. He put $500 on each of those parlays. And his name was on his account. The sportsbook turned him in, did the investigation for the league. And that's how he got caught.
When I first saw the sports book that he was wagering with, my thought was, well, he got a year because he didn't wager with the official partner of the NFL. That's a bigger sin to the NFL than anything. Oh, you didn't go with, what is it, Is it DraftKings or FanDuel?
Yeah, or Caesars, which is on the Superdome now in New Orleans.
Oh, you didn't go with one of our 3 official partners? That's a season. If you would have gone with one of the 3, Roger Goodell said it would have been half a year. But because you went with an outside sports book, that's an even more unforgivable sin. You always partner with our league partners. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't – I understand why you want to keep that out of your sport with guys actively playing because you want to uphold the integrity of your competition. But let's actually take some – a microscope to each story and say, all right, what's really fair in this situation? You can't apply nuance to this and not throw a blanket over it. The NFL failed in this instance.
Novak Djokovic has officially withdrawn from Indian Wells and their Open that's being hosted this week. The draw happens today. Tournament officials made it official yesterday where he waited until the very last minute. But it's clear that his application for entry into the country as an unvaccinated athlete for COVID-19 was looked over. They're not giving him any special treatment to come and play inside the United States. He's unvaxxed. We know that. We know his stance on it. And here's the thing. The May 11th, I believe, is the date where everything's going to be lifted as far as travel is concerned. And he was asking for leniency on getting into the states in order to play here. And it was, again, denied. You had Senator Rick Scott from Florida on over the weekend tweeted that they tried to help out the waiver request for Djokovic to no avail. Marco Rubio wrote a letter to President Biden on this to no avail. And again, the emergency declaration from the United States for COVID-19 in terms of traveling into the country ends on May 11th, where foreigners will be able to travel inside the country for whatever reason. That ban will be lifted. We're unvaccinated.
We're really hanging on to this thing, right? We have got our I feel like Al Pacino on Any Given Sunday. We're hanging on by our fingernails right now, trying to get any last inch of vax talk that we can in this country and make sure that people are held accountable for not getting vaccinated. We are just hanging on for dear life. May 11th? Is that when this ends?
May 11th. Well, that's what they say.
I mean, it's remarkable to me that this is still a thing.
Well, it's actually ended.
That's the craziest thing to me is that I just feel like everyone just kind of said, it's like the unspoken deal. Like, just come on in. It's fine. I don't really care anymore. No one really cares. I'll act like I care on social media about it, but I don't really care. So come on, if you're on, it doesn't really matter. And here you have where you've got this global sports superstar in Novak Djokovic that cannot get into the U.S.
22-time Grand Slam champion.
To compete in huge tennis tournaments.
In 2023.
That would help the business of all of these local areas because Novak Djokovic is there. And hey, guys, there's going to be no appeal process here. We got the rules until May 11th. These are the rules. There's no flexibility here. He will either get vaccinated right now or he will not participate in the United States. It's just I don't care what side you're on vaccinations, you have to take a look at this and laugh that we are still talking about this these many months later with a lot of new information out there and everything else that we know. And here we are still talking about Novak Djokovic can't get into the United States.
If Pfizer's facing lawsuits, but Djokovic can't travel from Dubai to here because he's trying to play in back-to-back tournaments.
Woody Harrelson's making jokes on SNL. I mean, Lorne Michaels is allowing
Woody
Harrelson. Lorne Michaels in the SNL cast, who are as far left, progressive, whatever you want to call them, as anyone else, are now sitting back and making some jokes.
They're now to the point where they're laughing at it.
About all this. They're joining in on the joke, too. Woody Harrelson is talking about Pfizer being a drug cartel. And that there should be a script to a movie about all the cartels getting together and deciding they're going to sell all these drugs. And if you don't take them, you can't do anything. And it's so unbelievable that no one would buy the script. Yet Novak Djokovic cannot get into the United States. It's
to play tennis.
This is comedy to me. Like this is like the movie Idiocracy by Mike Judge. This is just pure comedy. I've read this headline. I'm thinking, what? How? Oh, wait, there's actually, he can't even get into the country because of our laws?
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah, no one can unless you
come on.
vaccination
I'm not
status.
trying to make light of, anyone who's sick or was sick or anything else, but where we are now with this, this is pure comedy. This is funny to me that this is still a story.
Chad, I thought it was a joke when I saw the headline that Adam Silver, the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, is in line. He's on a short list of those in line to take over for Bob Iger at Disney as CEO whenever Iger steps away and retires in 2 years. I could have listed, I don't know how many names in sports. I would not have mentioned Adam Silver. If you said it's going to be a sports figure, who will it be? And Adam Silver is on a short list to take over for Disney. The background for him is sports. It's not into movies and film and the areas that Disney funds everything else with. I'm intrigued to learn more on this, but at the same time, I think surely this was a joke headline, and it's not. It's right in line with apparently what Disney wants.
I think Adam Silver's a really smart guy. Every time I've heard him interviewed, I think he's a very intelligent guy. I think he's probably a good manager in a lot of areas and understands business and media and all those things. And there's some things that he does really well. He's also been a big part in what is, to me, a diminishing return from the NBA. And
no doubt.
The financials show that also, by the way. So it's not just me, in my opinion, saying that. So it's crazy that he could fail upwards here, going from what is a much bigger job than the NBA commissioner is being the head of Disney, which basically controls media at this point. Mm-hmm. So we just got done talking about last week the Murdoch story down in South Carolina and how this really unveiled this interconnected good old boy network in South Carolina of guys scratching each other's back to get favors done, everything else, things that we know about in America and all this. To me, this is like the major media New York City version of the good old boy club. Like Adam Silver probably just had some really good friends in really high places.
He's one of three finalists, though.
That's why this is getting out there, and that's also why he is one of three finalists. Like, okay, are you really progressive? Are you going to come in and change the races of all the old Disney stories and put them back on there? If you check all these boxes, then we will consider you for the next CEO of Disney. And that's what Adam Silver checks.
I mean, it's the biggest media company in the world.
Yeah.
We mentioned them last week. $180 billion is what they're worth on the market.
I don't want to say that Adam Silver's Alec Murdoch, but do you think Alec Murdoch is you think that you look at him and you're like, oh, this is a guy who should run a major law firm? in an area. Like, he seems
The one
confident
area,
enough.
the one area where it's like, oh, that makes sense, is the long-running relationship that the NBA and
Yeah, look,
Disney/ESPN has with Iger.
Yeah,
But
in Hampton, South Carolina, the boxes you have to check are: do you go hunting with this guy? Check. Did you go to this public school in the SEC? Check. Are your kids friends with each other? Check.
do you know buckshot and birdshot?
Right. Do you understand? Do you have a beach house on some island in the Atlantic? Check. I mean, this is a different set of boxes that Silver checks. Progressive. Check. Donates to all the right political causes. Check.
Yeah.
Has been very progressive in the handling of a major league. Check. They're just going down the list. Knows everyone at Disney and on the board really well. Check. It's a more sophisticated version of the good old boy system is what we're watching here.
And you think it's more of like a, hey, thanks for being our friend. You're a finalist.
Yeah,
Well, you're not the guy.
Look, I think that they're people legitimately believe he'll do a good job also that are involved in this, but I think a lot of people on the board or whatever they have making these decisions, they know Silver, they're comfortable with him, they like him, and that's why he's a finalist.
Chad,
I don't think there's a lot of sports fans that are making this decision. The
No.
sports fans would look at it and say, wait a minute, this guy has not been that great for a beloved sports league. Why would he run Disney? I think it's people that don't know sports that are going to make this decision.
Chad, I'm surprised we're already seeing Chris Beard's name in the same season linked with other teams after he was fired from Texas and knowing the details, no charges brought forward, but knowing the details as to why Texas let him go, fired him with cause earlier this season, given the circumstances of the situation. And now, Mark Adams, head coach at Texas Tech, he has been placed on suspension, suspended after a racially insensitive comment made around a Bible verse involving slavery and slave-serving masters. And you asked Doncic about this earlier. He's inevitably going to be out. But here's another. He's a 66-year-old coach who, I mean, if Chris Beard's already back in the mix, he will be too. And he's already addressed it with the team, and he's still suspended.
Yeah, here's the thing with Mark Adams and anyone that's going to quote Scripture. It's one thing to quote Scripture, and you can do that, right? I mean, you can do that with your team. I've got no issue with that. I just think it's very odd that you want to quote Scripture about, a slave serving their master when you're the guy's coach. That doesn't seem to be hitting at the right points. And also, to me, it's very, with everything with Christianity, pointing out that verse in a coach-player relationship is incredibly self-serving of Mark Adams.
And yet he was encouraging players receiving coaching from their coaches.
Just like the Bible said that,
workers and
servants
teachers
submit to their masters or whatever it was. I just think this is a very self-serving thing to say. If you're going to quote Scripture to your players, when you're quoting something about serving me and not service to each other, I got an issue with that. If you're Mark Adams, I get it, is what I'm saying. I don't think this is necessarily right of him in this situation, and maybe that surprises people, but I can understand Texas Tech being upset with this. Now, there's two sides of the story. You got the thing coming out now that a player says he spit on him, and then Mark Adams is saying, I didn't spit on him. I was ill, and I was coughing for a month, and I happened to cough and slobber on him. But then the player said, and he said after he did that I can spit on you whenever I want, by the way. And Mark Adams says, I don't recall saying that. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it is time, that this maybe ends.
Texas Tech is looking into this.
He's going to get fired. There's no way you recover from this. Here's the bottom line. And this is not always fair, but the moment you're in charge of African-American players and the majority African-American players, and you are a white guy and you are labeled a racist because of something you said to your team, it's over. I don't think you can come back from that. I think it's going to be very hard for Mark Adams to stay employed and be employed and to recruit young black players to come play for him. That's just the bottom line of where we are. I don't see him coming back from this professionally.
Well, I want to learn more details of this, like from the spitting angle of the comment.
Yeah, there's going to be players that defend him. Dan Doncic brought up Pat Chambers at Penn State. There were plenty of African-American players who defended him after the fact. I think you'll get a lot of that with Texas Tech as well. And he's going to go serve as an assistant somewhere. He's a long-time valued assistant. He'll be on someone's staff. The days of him running a Power 5 basketball program are over. That is my prediction.
Coming up, Mike Renner joins us, Pro Football Focus's lead draft analyst. We recap the combine, and we start with the predicted, it was an easy prediction, buzz around one player, Anthony Richardson, quarterback from Florida. That's next on Outkick 360.
There are 7 levels to effort for a pitcher to get ready for the season. And by that, I mean each level that you step up, the effort level intensifies, increases. And you can't replicate one level before you get there because it just, psychologically, it's just impossible to do. But that first level is when you start throwing. The second level is when you get to the mound for the first time and throw your first bullpen. The third level is going into spring training and throwing that first bullpen in spring training. That's just a different level of effort. Then you have batting practice, which is another level. And then you go to live hitters. And then you go to a spring training game. And during that spring training game, during spring training, there's an increase in effort based on pitch counts as you increase through spring training, get ready for opening day. And finally, 7 is opening day. That final day is opening day when you can't replicate that effort. And the reason I point these out is each level is where you'll find a pitcher getting hurt if a pitcher gets hurt. Moving up a level is a degree of intensity. Like I said, you can't replicate it until you get there. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the WBC is day 7 of that program. There is the stadiums will be full. You're competing for something against guys who no one may know, but guys who are trying to win a job in spring training, trying to make a name or help their country win and all the things that go with that. But you're going from basically where these guys will be is level 4 or 5 or 6 to level 7. And I mention that again for this reason. If we back up to 2017, I'm going to throw some names out there. Felix Hernandez had 2 long DL stints after pitching in the WBC, went on with a shoulder injury in April, and then in August, bicep tendonitis, missed a couple months of the season. Sam Dyson, who was the Rangers closer in 2016, started the year, had a 10.8 ERA in 17 appearances, and was designated for assignment and done. Danny Duffy, lefty for the Royals, power arm, had multiple stints on the DL after a phenomenal 2016, and only threw 146 innings after a great 2016. Seth Lugo of the A's tore his UCL during the season after throwing 15 innings in the WBC. Urias Familia of the Mets had an arterial collateral clot in his shoulder, didn't come back till August. Edison Volquez of the Marlins threw a no-hitter in June, but we had Tommy John surgery on August 4th. That's just 7 guys. And as a fan, as an organization, I honestly would try and avoid having any of my pitchers ever go, just because I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I don't see anything positive. And here's the other thing, too. If you think about spring training from March 1st to March 29th this year, because opening day is the 30th, that's 29. We'll say there's 30 days in spring training, 30 days of games. The 8th to the 21st takes 13 days out of that, which means you have 17 days as a starting pitcher to get ready for spring training, to get ready for opening day, which means you're probably talking 4 starts. And you're going from 2 innings in a back B field game to start the camp to full stadium, packed house, live competition, and then dialing it back down as you come back to spring training. I just find that to be something, and I was a guy who I always shot to have 30 to 32 innings in spring training, with my second to last start being 100 pitches. Where I could get 7 or 8 innings out because I wanted to be ready to go opening day to throw a complete game. I didn't want pitch count to be a factor. And then my last start, I'd throw a 50 or 60 pitch tune-up. They don't have the luxury of doing those things given what they're being thrown into. And I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out if you're a fan, if you're a fantasy owner, or if you're someone who bets the games, I would have a lot of trouble putting money around guys in the WBC that pitch for any length of time coming up this year.
from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Outkick 360 rolls on across the Outkick network. It was predictable, right? The freak athlete that is Anthony Richardson was going to show out at the NFL Combine. We're going to lead with that in just a moment with Mike Renner from Pro Football Focus, their lead draft analyst. But on Friday, Dan Mullen, former head coach of the Florida Gators, spoke about the quarterback he knows well.
On raw talent, he might be the most talented raw talent quarterback I've ever been with. And been around. And I've been around some great ones. On raw talent, he's up there in Cam Newton levels, but maybe even, I don't want to upset Cam, but even more talented than Cam, just on his athletic ability, his accuracy, how the ball jumps out of his hands at a younger age. Cam, I think, worked and really had the athleticism, but really developed. I thought Anthony's just even more of a natural thrower with his throwing motion and how the ball comes out of his hands. And, you look at some of these guys that have been out there. He has all that raw talent.
That's former head coach Dan Mullen there. We welcome in Mike Renner of Pro Football Focus, the lead draft analyst who was in Indy and has been covering all of this for Pro Football Focus. Mike, I'm sure you also could have predicted this, right? The buzz was going to be about Anthony Richardson. Did he meet expectations?
It's hard when you are to say he didn't meet expectations when he tests out as the most athletic quarterback of all time. Yeah, I think he met expectations, but I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said we all saw this coming. It's like you can't double count it because you knew it already on tape. So the fact that he's getting buzz now, it's like, did you not watch him at Florida? Did you not see this coming? The dude's a freak. Like, we all knew it.
And it's got to be, obviously, we watch a lot of his games covering the SEC and watching everything in that conference. It's the inconsistency, that we all knew about, why he's not automatically the no-brainer number one overall pick, given all that athleticism. Mike, how do you account for that inconsistency when you try to evaluate Anthony Richardson?
It's tough, right? Because, Will Levis is inaccurate, too. The Kentucky quarterback's inaccurate, too. Will Levis' career completion percentage is 10 percentage points higher than Anthony Richardson. So we're talking about different levels here of inaccuracy. But, there are things about his game that are fixable when it comes to accuracy. Like a lot of his inaccurate throws are due to a very inconsistent base. You'll see one throw and his feet will be about 6 feet apart, or not. Maybe that's exaggerating, but like 4 or 5 feet apart as he's releasing it. And you have another one where they're about 2 feet. They're just his shoulder width apart. He's very inconsistent with the platforms he's throwing off of. And so that's obviously going to lead to a lot of airmails, a lot of spikes. It's going to lead to, up and down issues, which I think are his biggest issues you see on tape. So if you can get more consistent with that, you can expect an uptick in accuracy. Now, the thing is, with tools the way he possesses, with as talented he is as a runner, you don't need to be too much more accurate. You don't need to be too much better of a passer to really make an impact at the NFL level, kind of how we saw with Justin Fields this past year. He was in no way a good passer, but the dude's legs brought him a high floor, and that Bears offense put some points on the scoreboard because of it. So I do think that that's why you're seeing teams getting on board with top 10 hype, because if he came and ran a 4.8, he would not even be drafted in this year's draft.
Mullen, I know you heard mention Cam Newton. You think there's another comp for Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, Newton, it's just putting him in too polished an air as a passer. I thought Newton was much more of now he could lower the shoulder, but he was much more of a smooth athlete, not necessarily the sudden, powerful athlete that Anthony Richardson is. He reminds me, just in terms of physicality, of someone like Dante Culpepper, where it's just guys will melt off of his frame at the NFL level. And Culpepper, obviously, a little before his time in terms of, utilizing, in terms of offense coordinators, utilizing that like rushing threat, that physicality to his, imagine Dante Culpepper running sneaks the way the Eagles run sneaks right now. That would have been unstoppable back in the day. Dude was 255 pounds. So it's a unique skill set that Richardson possesses. But I do think you see it, with Dante Culpepper, who was more accurate coming out for sure. But his best ability was just that athleticism paired with a cannon. And you get him a big play receiver. Obviously, when Culpepper had Moss, probably not going to get a Moss or Richardson, but you can get some speed and some deep threats. You pair that together and you have an explosive offense that doesn't need It doesn't need to complete 70% of his passes. It can only complete 60, but the ones that it does complete are going to be, 40 yards down the football field.
Well, you mentioned the word frame when talking about Anthony Richardson. On the flip side of that is Bryce Young from a frame standpoint. And I always laugh when, there was speculation. I think he was asked, what are you going to weigh in at the combine? He said, I think I'm going to weigh in at 200 pounds. And this was days before. And I'm thinking, if you're saying I think I'm going to weigh in at a certain amount, it's all fake. That doesn't matter because you're just trying to add weight to weigh in at a certain number. You don't really play at that number. I'm more concerned with your playing weight and your frame and your size to be at your most effective. How big are you? When you see his size, what's the level of concern, Mike, in terms of his ability to stay healthy at the next level?
Yeah, when I hear an answer like that, all I'm thinking is agent in his ear. That is not Bryce Young's opinion.
Or I think like UFC fighter. Like I plan on weighing at this, but then I'm going to lose 20 pounds the moment I leave India. Exactly. I'm going to gain 20 pounds if my agent told me to lose weight for the combine. None of it's real if you're like planning out a date where you're going to weigh a certain amount.
Yeah, I don't think Bryce Young cares if he's 200 pounds or 190 pounds with the way he himself plays quarterback. Because just adding that, probably mostly either water weight or fat or a combination of the two isn't going to help you play any better. So I want him at 185 if that's the weight he really was playing at last year. And truthfully, I wanted to see him go to that combine and actually test because I think his athleticism's really gotten underrated in this. Like he can move. He is difficult to even touch in space, let alone tackle. And I think that's one of his biggest selling points is that, he's a big size outlier, but he's an athletic outlier too. Like, this guy can really move. He could play slot receiver tomorrow if he really wanted to with those movement skills. But I want those movement skills at quarterback because, we just talked about Anthony Richardson. And when they stood side by side or anywhere near each other, they looked like they played different sports altogether. And that should really tell you the fact that we're still talking about Young as a better prospect should just tell you how impressive he is on tape, that we're talking about a guy who's 5'10", probably in the 185 to 190 range, being the bona fide QB1 because his tape is that unbelievable when you flip it on. To me, from a on-field perspective, it's right up there with Joe Burrow as a prospect. It's right up there with Trevor Lawrence as a prospect. The only thing that he doesn't have that those guys had was the size. And truthfully, if he was 6'4", we would be talking about him as maybe even a better prospect than those guys.
Mike Renner with us from Pro Football Focus. Why is C.J. Stroud not in that stratosphere, in the same atmosphere as those other quarterbacks you just mentioned?
I think C.J. Stroud, the one aspect that he doesn't quite have is the creativity to his game. He's very much a point and shoot type of quarterback. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can win at the NFL level for sure. Like that's, that has been traditionally what's won at the NFL level for, from West Coast offense on. So it just doesn't quite fit the wave of creators at the position. The guys who really have that creativity, that outside of structure, that ability to nothing's there. I'm going to put the team on my back. I'm going to make something happen. You just didn't see that on his tape anywhere near as much as you saw on the tape of a Bryce Young. And then the other thing was on top of that, you just didn't see him handle pressure well. And that's worrisome given that he was not under pressure a lot, that this Ohio State offensive line, as we're going to see, has 2 top 50 picks starting at left and right tackle and maybe another top 100 pick at center. Like it was one of the best offensive lines in college football, if not the best. And so that's just an easy situation. It's kind of the Ohio State quarterback knock now that they're playing the game on easy mode. And just what's that going to look like once he gets to the NFL? I think that's probably the most worrisome thing about it is that just it's going to be a completely different game for him. Now, I love him still, but it just comes with more question marks than Bryce Young, whose offensive line or receiving core looked nothing like Ohio State's this year.
I think this will help put in perspective for our viewers and radio audience alike. Where would Kenny Pickett be in this year's quarterback crop?
I think he'd be firmly QB5 in this year's quarterback.
Okay.
Like, with this class, now obviously he went pick 20 and whatever,
right.
But like with this class, you would probably like 4 quarterbacks in the first round. It might push him to day 2 in a class like this. I think it's that good of a quarterback class.
So who is QB5 in this year's draft?
QB5, I lean towards, so obviously I mentioned the 4 guys, Levis, Richardson, Stroud, Young. I lean towards Tanner McKee. Now, it would have been a debate if Hendon Hooker was healthy, but after the torn ACL, thinking that may torpedo his rookie year, his development at already 25 years old with that Tennessee offense being as just gimmicky, collegey, whatever you want to say, and not translatable as it is. I just think he's too far behind the developmental curve. I'll lean Tanner McKee, the Stanford quarterback, just because of the accuracy.
What do you think about his traits overall, though? Taking the offense part out of it, and we've discussed at length that every Mike Leach quarterback, every Josh Heupel quarterback will probably get the label of a system quarterback because of the offense they're in. But when you see his height, his size, his accuracy, his velocity, his deep ball, what do you not like about Hendon Hooker in terms of the traits you see on the field?
I think I like all those things. I'll just say that. I like all those things. The one thing that I really come back to that I worry a bit about him is that he drops his eyes quickly. Like once he is not a passer anymore, once he has to move off his spot, he is immediately a runner. I think he, in his Tennessee career, the stat was he has like 3 completions after he broke the pocket his entire Tennessee career. That's a little worrisome. That's just not necessarily how. Now, he's a good athlete, don't get me wrong, but that's not really how the game is played at the NFL level. You have to be able to move off your spot. You have to be able to stick with your progressions even when things start to get muddied. Whereas as soon as it started to get muddy at Tennessee, he was all of a sudden a runner. He was all of a sudden getting out there on the move. So that's something that's just a little worrisome, again, in his prospect profile projecting to the next level.
Mike, non-quarterback, who improved their stock the most? Maybe just gained an extra boost from where they were pre-Indianapolis to now the Monday after?
There's a number of guys. I think the one that I've really gone back to is Jackson Smith-Njigba, the Ohio State wide receiver, because we didn't see him. You didn't see him all fall. When he did, he was hampered with a hamstring injury. Just was not the same. But last time we saw him, he was only 19 years old. When Justin Jefferson was a 19-year-old, he was not the first-round prospect and future top 3 wide receiver that he is now in the NFL. Like, guys can, at that age, seriously develop physically. And I think with Jackson Smith-Njigba, I'm not saying he necessarily did, but I do think that the athleticism concerns, and while we still didn't see him run a 40, the 3-cone and the short shuttle were elite times, and especially elite when you consider he's 196 pounds in a class full of sub 180-pound wide receiver. So in a class that's not great, he is the surest thing at that position. And when you are that agile and can change directions the way he did, in not only the 3-cone and the short shuttle, but in obviously the on-field portion and the drills, I think teams are just going to say, we'll take the sure thing. We'll take the slot receiver that we know is going to be a high-end slot receiver his entire career here.
When you see some of these pass rushers run such fast 40 times, Nolan Smith in the 4.3s, Byron Young from Tennessee in the 4.4s, does that jump off the page to you, or do you think we're sort of entering an era now where we're going to see more and more of this, the way the college game is played, guys that are 240s, 250s that can run this way?
It seems like every year now there's at least one, if not 2, right? Montez Sweat went 4.4. Dafe Owe went 4.4. This is just becoming commonplace, and I feel for offensive tackles around the NFL. I don't know how they block these guys. It's becoming increasingly more difficult, but yeah, I think Nolan Smith really did himself, obviously with the pec injury, didn't get to see him second half of the year. I think the numbers he put up really put him in that top 15 to top 20 conversation. You think about Hassan Reddick, who's the Eagles edge rusher, one of the best sack artists in the NFL, had a monster season. He was billed as like a freak coming out at the almost exact same size and ran a 4.52. Almost a tenth of a second slower, didn't jump nearly as high. And they're like, oh, look at this athletic freak, Hassan Reddick. Well, they're getting a little freakier. And Nolan Smith's in that similar mold that as a pure speed rusher that Georgia didn't really utilize him in such a role. I think he can be a nightmare at the next level.
Mike Renner with us from Pro Football Focus. How much buzz, just as you're out and about in Indy, was about Jalen Carter and everything going on in Athens? And what's the impact that you feel that will have on late April in his draft stock?
Yeah, you couldn't stay away from it. You couldn't have any conversations about the top of the draft without mentioning it, right? Because it throws a wrench not only in where his future plans, where he gets drafted, but the Bears and the trade options that they're going to be willing to explore. Indianapolis Colts felt like an easy destination, trading down from 1 to 4 because you were going to either get him or you're going to get Will Anderson. Well, there's a big difference between him and Will Anderson as prospects and maybe a Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, who might be the next position player off the board. in terms of the certainty with which you feel like them being impact players at the next level. So I do think that's going to be one of the biggest stories, if not the biggest story to track heading into the combine, or excuse me, into the out of the combine, into the actual NFL draft. But it would not surprise me if, with as talented as he is, and with how we've seen NFL teams find ways to make excuses for guys who are damn good at football, would not surprise me that if this just kind of gets swept under the rug, draft day, he gets picked in the top 4, GM says all the right stuff, Carter says all the right stuff, and maybe some fans complain, but come next fall, they won't be complaining when he's on the football field for them.
Yeah, and rumors were circulating, as it always happens in Indy, Mike, where the Bears want this year's first from a team plus a second, and then the next 2 years first-round picks in exchange for pick number 1. And I know that depends on where they're moving back in the first round, but from there to, okay, which teams are going to move up and pay that price? Was there a sense of the team that you feel will be the most aggressive in trying to get ahead of Houston at number 2?
Well, to pay that kind of price, it's not the Colts going to be doing that. It's not the Texans going to be doing that. If you're that close, it's not going to cost that much. The teams I could see being that desperate, 2 teams. I think one, the Tennessee Titans, because you are either jumping the Texans for Bryce Young, or you're playing against Bryce Young for the next decade and Trevor Lawrence in that same division. So this might be the year to make, to sell out with obviously kind of this tear down rebuild that they're in, throw some picks away and go get your guy. They could make a lot of sense. Or New York Jets, 2 picks later, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to be a Jet, if they kind of are left out in the cold in this quarterback carousel we find every spring, would not surprise me if they're willing to mortgage it all just to get a guy like Bryce Young in the fold because of how good that roster is already and how special that core could be. You could say, our next couple first-round picks, not going to be nearly as impactful as what Bryce Young could do with this roster.
And then anyone in the NFC South, not New Orleans, right? Like, it could be any of those teams as well that we know are quarterback needy based on the current depth chart.
Yeah, the thing is with them, so sitting at 8, sitting at 9, they might be thinking, hey, we'll take an Anthony Richardson that falls to us. We'll wait to see if CJ Stroud falls. We don't want to give up a future first because we may not be a good team next year. That future first might be a top 5 pick that gets us a quarterback. So I could see the conversations for those teams being a little bit different, still being in striking distance with 4 quarterbacks probably still going in the top 10.
How good is the running back crop this year? And just to compare it to another deep class, the corners this year seem to be very good.
Those are, for my money, probably the top 2 positions in this draft. I know tight end's very good too. Tight end's right in the realm, but those have, top end talent. This running back class and the cornerback class, they got top end talent. They got depth. They got really everything. They got a little something for everyone. To me, this running back class is probably as good as I've seen since at least, I believe, I want to say 2018. That was Saquon year, Nick Chubb. I think Rashad Penny that year. Like, that one had a lot of top 50 picks. I don't know if we're going to see draft capital wise it be that good, but I think there's, 10 guys in this class, over 10 guys. I think there's 13 guys in this class that the grades I had on them would have made them top 5 running backs in last year's class. So that just tells you how deep this group goes, with obviously Bijan Robinson at the top headlining it, and Jahmyr Gibbs with the 4.36 he ran, maybe sneaking into the first as well. So love that one. And then the cornerback class, you saw it in Indy. The times those guys were putting up, everyone running a 4.3 somehow. I'm a big fan of that corner class. I think if you're in the first round, you really can't go wrong taking one of these guys.
Well, going back to running back, the news out today that the Titans were gauging interest in a potential trade on what they could get in return for Derrick Henry. I think those in Nashville are thinking, well, that means they're throwing in the towel, not necessarily considering who they could potentially draft later after the first round.
Yes, and this free agency class is one of the deepest in recent history too. So if you want to transform your running back room, this is the offseason to do so.
Were there coaches that didn't show up other than the Rams this year? Is that becoming more of the trend to the combine?
Yes, it is, because it's a week of work still. These teams still have a ton of scouting to do. You've got to prepare yourself as much as possible. And if you've ever been to the combine in Indy, there's not a ton of work going on after 5 p.m. Now, some of those guys will be humping it. Some of those guys are really 9 sun up to sundown. The Brandon Staleys of the world are really getting after it, but a lot of coaches enjoy themselves out there in Indy. So
they're getting after it, just in a different way.
I could see that becoming a bigger trend, is not maybe just sending a few guys on these trips, because truthfully, the amount you glean from being on that field, watching them do position workouts, it's not that much. The tape's still king.
Mike Renner, he evaluates that tape at Pro Football Focus. You can check him out on Twitter at PFF_Mike. Great stuff, man. Thank you for the perspective, and hopefully we'll be able to check in with you before round one really kicks off in KC.
For sure, fellas. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
thanks, Mike.
There's Mike Renner from Pro Football Focus. Again, the lead draft analyst there for their site. Always a tremendous site for information on
really
beneath
good.
the surface. Chad, the live Netflix special,
Selective Outrage.
Chris Rock finally used the Will Smith slap as stand-up comedy.
Almost a year later, he publicly has his response.
The timing is right on the we're very close to the Oscars, right?
Yeah.
Coming up, next week or 2 weeks from now? We'll discuss Chris Rock addressing the slap next on Outkick 360.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, whoa, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Come on, live a little.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader.
I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life.
ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. The bold taste of a Southern legend.
6th of the Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Chad, was the Chris Rock special on Netflix last night, or was it Saturday night?
Saturday night.
Saturday night. Was it actually live?
Yeah.
I didn't see this guy fumble once or stumble once over any word.
I don't think they would lie about that. I think there's some issues when you say something's 100% live and it's not.
Was it streamed live for debuted as live?
Yeah.
But it was taped live, or was
you know where I really knew it was live? So they went to it and it was like a pre-show and a post-show.
Yeah.
And they were at the Comedy Store in L.A. is where it started. And they had a host and they brought out J.B. Smoove at one point through the audience. And not that it was bad. I'm just watching. I'm like, this is very clearly live.
Yeah.
They're trying to do a
Unedited.
bit where he's talking to the audience, and you could tell there was no editing done. The camera's a little slow to get to him. He's, his mic doesn't work in the post show, and they have to give him a handheld mic at one point because he was so loud when he was moving. His live mic was just little things you can tell. Like, okay, this is live. This is very clearly a live show. It was the open of it, I could tell, was live when they had the camera on him. You could see him talking to someone saying, let's go, or something to take the stage when they were introducing him. And then when he came out, I mean, he's perfected that whole stand-up special for months now. He's been doing it in front of audiences for a while.
It for the first 2/3 before he hit Will Smith, I felt like I was back at Zany's that night we went and watched him just try jokes on stage in front of 200 people.
I thought it was really good. I thought the first 20 minutes were probably the worst.
Yeah, because I kept wanting the Will Smith stuff. That's what I wanted to hear the other stuff. Like, I'll go back and find it. Just give me the timestamp.
I heard from someone who had been to his live show that wait till the last 15 minutes.
Okay.
He kind of teases Will Smith. He starts with, his first joke is, anyone who says words hurt have never been slapped or punched in the face before, because that hurts. And then he teases it up until the end with the Will Smith material. I thought it was really well done. Again, I thought the first 15, 20 minutes, he was really sort of feeling his way out with the audience. And once he started getting the huge laughs on stage, he started rolling. It was much more of a Chris Rock stand-up special for the middle part of it to the very end with Will Smith. I'll tell you one way, Hutton, I knew you didn't make it to the end, did you?
I have. I've gone back and watched it. Yeah.
Well, where it's live is that in the very end, he screws up the concussion joke.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He says in the middle, he's like, and I screwed that up because I was supposed to say concussion is what he was mad at. They were mad at him. He hosted the Oscars, and Will Smith wasn't nominated for concussion, and he said he wasn't nominated for emancipation. And the joke was they were so mad he wasn't nominated for concussion, he gave me one years later, and he said, I screwed that joke up. I should have said concussion. He started over, if you notice, in the middle of the stand-up bit.
And, I mean, I was not expecting him to go down the path of Will Smith's wife again, and he did.
Oh, he went all in.
And that was so intriguing to me is what will be the response. Will Smith claims he's tried to reach out to him multiple times to no avail. That's the other story that dropped today.
This is what's confusing is Chris Rock says in the stand-up, and I've reached out to him and haven't heard back.
I know.
He claims he's reached out to Will Smith, and Will Smith's not returning his call. I thought it was great. Look, the bottom line of what he's saying is Will Smith isn't mad at me. He wants to hit his wife, and he can't.
Yeah.
So he took it out on me.
That's what he's insinuating.
The smallest guy up on the stage. I love how he said, don't let all the camera trickery fool you. He is significantly bigger than I am when he walked up there and hit him.
He's like, did it hurt? Yeah, it hurt.
He was punching down. This was a guy he could go up and attack. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was on the post show, which was odd. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said, yeah, I'm pretty sure if I'd have made that joke, he wouldn't have walked up there and swung up at me. If I were on stage.
How about whatever he said? I'm not going to cave to the pressure or try to get people to cry for me. I'm not going to go on Oprah or Gayle King. I took that like Manny Pacquiao.
He said, I took that hit like Manny Pacquiao.
I would say better.
I love how he said he had a concussion and that for the last year, summertime, probably Will Smith was ringing in his ear. Also a really good joke. Look, he handled it well. And he said, I'm never going to be a victim about anything. I'm not going to be the victim about all this. So I didn't want to do any of that, where I'm going to play the victim. It was really well done. He made great points.
But he was like, Jada hurt him more than I hurt him.
Yeah.
I mean, again, go see it for yourself. But I was surprised he went down this path of.
He said, I'm not the one in any entanglements.
Yeah.
He's not mad at me. He's mad at her. It was good.
Incredible. And now Will Smith is not nominated, so if it happened this year, he would be taken out.
There's also a joke about
escorted out.
There's also a joke about the movie that Will Smith's in that Mark Adams would probably make, but I won't.
Okay.
that only Chris Rock can make, but it's very funny to anyone who watches it.
Pate State. Josh Pate from 24/7 Sports and Late Kick Live joins us next.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming on. And so much to talk about. And I kind of just want to dive right in as somebody I watch your show, and these are conversations that you have had in the past couple of months. And, NIL is such a game changer when it comes to different aspects of college sports. And we're starting to see that influx when it comes to boosters, people around the program, how schools are navigating. Before we get into like the inner wellings of it, what's been your thoughts on how this has played out over the last 2 years?
Is an implosion waiting to happen. Kind of what I said a few years before it started. I came on someone, I think I was on McAfee when I said about 3 years ago, I'm like, listen, the NIL should not be conducted this way. It should not be formatted this way. It should not be constructed this way or created this way. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's going to end up imploding college football, and it will be the end of junior college. It'll be the end of high school recruiting. It'll be the end of a lot of this stuff compiled with transfer portal. So I say you put these two things together, you're gonna kill JUCO, which 3 years later, right now to this day, we just had our second California JUCO fold. Kansas JUCOs are not doing well at all. Mississippi is not doing well at all. Resource-wise, you're not going to have the resources you once have. You've already seen the entire state of Arizona lose junior college football. So you're having this influx that people don't realize that has a direct impact just from the correlation of these things. And people don't really look into it deep because they just want to see what's on the surface. They only look through the optical lens of things. They don't really dive into anything. And it blows my mind that we're in this analytical world and we don't look into the data and the analytics. We just want to talk on Twitter because all people on Twitter know all things, right? So when I'm sitting there talking and I'm sitting there looking into it and I'm like, well, look, what they should have did was, by the way, a good friend of mine growing up with Ed O'Bannon, he's the one that started this whole thing with the NCAA NIL deal. We played high school basketball together, and Charles and Ed, and he started this thing, and it's crazy, right? It's a slap in the face. NCAA, we already know what that stands for, non-caring assholes of America. They basically pay everybody like $11, right? 100,000 people get paid like $11. Oh, we won. Well, you didn't really win. You created this NIL deal, which basically is for the 1%ers, Trey. 1%ers. Yeah. Think about it. Everyone thinks on the outside looking in that these kids are getting millions. No, 1%, if that, I would actually say 0.001% is actually getting the millions. The rest of the percentage, the 99.9% of the kids are average NIL dollar. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's $300.
Just like that, the final hour is here for the Monday edition of Outkick 360. Glad you're with us. Hutton and Withrow with you. 6th and Peabody, our location, with EHOB Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Always great when we can head to Pate State. Josh Pate joins us. 24/7 Sports.
Never a bad day.
No, never.
Never a bad day when we go to Pate State.
Late Kick Live is where you can find Late Kick Josh on social. Josh, good to see you, man.
Yeah, I can just about see you guys out of the window behind me.
Yeah, we're waving at you right now.
Yeah, well, I'm waving in your direction right now. There you go.
Got you.
You probably see us.
If I yell really loud, we don't even need all the technology.
You are back from Indianapolis. Best conversation, best thing you saw. It could be anything. What's your number one headline from Indy at the Combine?
It occurred to me, as it does this time every year, that a lot of people who cover the NFL do not watch college football. They see highlights of it, but they really don't watch college football.
Very true.
So I've talked to, like, I kid you not, half a dozen people about this today already, just private conversations. And it's about Anthony Richardson. And then we're walking that tightrope right now of a guy being hyped a lot. And maybe he'll fulfill on all that hype. I would say statistically, he's more likely not to fulfill on it. And then you're going to get the same folks who built the hype bubble calling him a failure instead of themselves. And I listen to the NFL folks get wowed by the fact that he's a physical alien. And that shouldn't have surprised anyone because we already knew that. Anyone who claims they watch college football already knew that. We've already seen this guy shine in non-football related situations. And it was called spring and summer of 2022, fall camp in 2022. That's all you heard out of Florida. Well, then we got to the season and he had like 7 games where he was under 60% completion percentage. Again, that's the player he is. So if you build him up and build him up and build him up because of what he's doing at the Combine in dry fit shorts, that's on you. And I didn't think that in the entirety of America was going to fall into that trap, but apparently we have. So I'm pulling for him. I got nothing against Anthony Richardson. Love that guy. We got him for like 10 minutes to ourselves on set. I think his calves are as big as some people's actual torso, by the way, just like a total alien. But I'm very interested in the group of people that tells me Hendon Hooker's like a day 3 guy and Will Levis and Anthony Richardson are like the future of organizations. That always befuddles me a little bit.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Hendon Hooker because all he did since he was named the starter at Tennessee was produce consistently over and over again. And we had Mike Renner on from Pro Football Focus, did a great job with us, but you talked about, pro football guys oftentimes won't watch a lot of college football. I asked him about Hendon Hooker, and he said, well, he's in a gimmicky offense. And then I asked, well, tangibly, what do you not like about him? And I listed height, weight, velocity, accuracy, deep ball. I was like, well, I like all those things. And that's sort of where we are, right? With Hendon Hooker, with a lot of people is, yeah, but he was in Josh Heupel's offense, so how good is he really? Because everyone's going to put up numbers in that offense. What do you think, Josh, when you hear that argument about Hendon Hooker?
Well, the argument itself is lame. I'm not speaking about a specific person, but the argument itself is lame because you got to be able to do better than that. If you've got a fully formed opinion on a guy, you should be able to do the same thing that I do. If you ask me about moon pie, I don't like moon pies. I think they're just a hot circle of garbage. I can tell you why I feel that way. Hendon Hooker, a lot of people are speaking about him the way I speak about moon pies, but yet just as you said, when you make them dive deep on it, they say, well, he played in an offense. Well, I'm not drafting his offense. I'm drafting him. And if I'm drafting him 2nd or 3rd round, I may not be drafting him to start immediately. So if I have any organization worth its salt, should I not be able to develop him? And that's a rhetorical question I would ask myself. So I asked a bunch of people up there because, you see, I don't live in the mock draft world. I live in college football world. And so sometimes when I see guys shining at the college level, I just assume the NFL's enamored with them. And apparently they're not with Hendon Hooker. So that's fine. We've had great college quarterbacks before that didn't do a lot in the pro game. I just want to know, like you just asked, what is it specifically about him? And other than a surgery and age, I haven't really had someone tangibly put in front of me an argument that makes me go, oh, yeah, all right, you're right. He'll probably flame out.
Josh Pate with us. Is Will Anderson the best non-quarterback in this draft? And if not, who is?
Now, yes, I'm saying yes, but it's not a slam dunk yes. You know what I wonder about that I have no clue how to answer this. Bama had some games last year. Texas was one of them. I was at that game where Will Anderson just like from the neck up, false start or offside after offside penalty. It felt like he was like mentally a little rattled. And there were a couple of times this year where he spoke publicly about how I just think we had some anxiety going into that game. And sometimes I can understand that from a quarterback. Like I can understand that from certain positions. an edge rusher saying that kind of stuff just stood out to me a little bit. It sounds like I'm speaking negatively about him. I'm giving you the reason why it's just kind of yes, a whispered, hushed yes, instead of a slam dunk yes, because just as much as you remember 2022, you also have to remember 2021. And just as much as people knock Will Anderson for his 2022, you were judging him in entirely different categories than the rest of college football. Because if you judged him just heads up, apples to apples against the rest of the country, he was still the best edge rusher in the country, in my opinion. So I think he's going to be really good. It's all about fit, obviously, but I think he's really good. And yes, I would say probably best non-quarterback right now.
Let's talk about another Will Levis. So because we watch, all the Kentucky games, I think it's been very easy for those that love Will Levis to say, well, the offensive coordinator was bad. Look at the old offensive coordinator. The offensive line was bad. The receivers were worse without Wan'Dale Robinson. And I keep going back to, Josh, if he's so good and he's a top 5 or 10 pick, he had to elevate his team at some point this past year. And I just did not see that this past season with Will Levis. What do you make of his overall career at Kentucky and where you see him in line with some of these other quarterbacks that are getting ready to get drafted?
I keep going back to what you just said. I've said it about him and Richardson. If you are telling me a guy is worthy of a top 10 draft pick, that means as a quarterback, he is supposed to be a multi-year franchise caliber quarterback. That is my understanding of how the draft works. And so if a guy is that, he's pretty transcendent at the college game. And it doesn't, by transcendent, I mean Cam Newton 2010. You surround him with otherwise average athletes that you don't remember the names of. No one remembers anyone else from that 2010 Auburn team. Offensively, you remember one in Cam Newton, and that was good enough to win Auburn a national title because Cam Newton was that good. I never saw Will Levis take over a game. Quite the opposite. I saw a game take over Will Levis. One of them happened in the very state in which we sit right now. I watched games take over Anthony Richardson, and the Kentucky game. We're talking about Levis and Kentucky. They went down to Gainesville in week 2 when all that hype had built after Florida beat Utah in week 1. Richardson had no clue where the ball was going in week 2. And likewise, Kentucky won the game. What because Will Levis just took over anything. So I agree with you. I want to make an argument. Like I want to see all those guys do good. You get drafted top 10. I want you to shine. There's no one in this draft I'm pulling against. Some years there are, but this year, no one I'm pulling against. But I see it with Stroud. I see it with Young. I don't see it with any of those other guys, at least to the degree that it should be to be taken top 10.
Josh, the proposed SEC schedule, the 3 common opponents that was leaked or reported on or whatever last week, I just wish we would just come out and say this is it, because Sankey's already said he wanted to get this done before the spring meetings.
Was this a test balloon to see how we'd all react to it?
Why do we have to test it? I mean, I think the common fan's just going to look at it and be like, okay, is Alabama playing? We're playing Auburn. Okay, cool. Let's turn this in. Like, why the test balloon if in fact this is what they're voting on?
I can't believe you guys are complaining about this. What are you complaining for? This is a godsend. I actually have my phone now propped up on a stack of paper plates because that's how professionally I roll over here. But it's like God has taken one of these plates, turned it into silver, flipped it upside down, and said, "Here's some stuff to talk about."
Yeah.
I'm all for
but there's no problem. There's no
February
problem.
And March.
I don't see any problem with it though. That's the issue. They should have left Auburn off of Alabama's schedule and then change it when they get down to Florida.
Do you see a problem with any of the trios that are out there of common opponents?
I thought, listen, it was a good thing that Auburn's got changed, because if they were drawing Bama, Georgia, and who was it, LSU every year, that was going to be a disaster. I talked to someone with Bama today, and they still think if they bang that drum loud enough, they may be able to get that LSU every year changed. And I get, from a fundamental standpoint, I get what they're saying, because I'd make the same argument as them. That model the SEC's using thinks Tennessee's terrible, and Nick Saban's over there like, wake up, they're not bad anymore. You can't do this to me. By the way, I was told for a long time Nick Saban ran the conference. I was told that all the decisions ran through Tuscaloosa, and all of a sudden he goes on vacation for a week. It's like in our office. They set up an entire ping pong tournament when I went out of town. Nick Saban goes out of town for a week. They just changed the schedule on him.
Josh, if he gets that thing changed, though, he does run the conference, because no one else is getting that schedule changed, and he's the one that's banging the drum about, it's unfair, all these multiple national championships I've won, and they can't possibly give me Tennessee every year. If he actually gets that changed, I think there's some truth to those rumors about him having a direct line to the SEC office.
Well, now you've put everyone in a no-win situation because either Nick Saban's mad at the conference or the conference is in bed with Nick Saban, and either way, it ends poorly for some people. Of course, it ends great for us because either way is a win for us.
Is it a win that Arch Manning is competing for the starting job with Quinn Ewers in spring practice? That is what Sarkisian has said. And how long does Sarkisian have before he's told to put Manning in if things go awry early on?
See, I think they're going to redshirt him. And that's coming from inside Texas. I mean, that's within the past couple of weeks. Granted, it was before, man, it got really dark in here. That was before spring ball started. But there are people around the Texas program that feel like he's best suited to redshirt this year. That's contingent on Quinn Ewers definitively winning the job, obviously. But just because Quinn Ewers wins the job, I think we all understand how the season would go out there.
Oh, yeah.
Quinn Ewers, if he does win the job, it's good until you lose. It's like it at A&M. Petrino's the offensive coordinator. Yeah, he's the play caller, and it's fine until they go into the half and they've got 6 points on the board. And then the head man's got to make a decision. Is he going to take control of the offense? At Texas, head man's got to make a decision. Is he going to pull the trigger on Arch Manning? I think that's going to be a year-long thing. If I had to bet, I think Quinn Ewers is going to be the guy there. He'll put it together, and they'll have a good season. And look, for all we know, Texas in year 3 under Sark could do exactly what FSU did in year 3 under Norvell. You give it a little time, and eventually you acquire enough talent, get some good line of scrimmage talent, which they did not have when he got there. Maybe Texas goes pop in year 3.
Josh, you're the perfect person to ask this question. Based on recent events, last season combined with this offseason, who needs to win the most early in this season in the SEC? My vote is Florida. Based on everything this offseason with Jaden Rashada, with the way year 1 went with Billy Napier, even though they've recruited well, and not that he's in trouble in year 2, but I feel like that's a program they need to see some good things on the field for that fan base and everyone around it. What do you think of all the, and there's other candidates out there, obviously, but what program needs to win the most this year for whatever criteria, whatever reason you want to throw out there?
Florida's a good one. Since you took Florida, though, I got to go Texas A&M because that's legitimate. We gave you time. You tried it your way. It wasn't working. Now you've hired a coordinator, and we gave you free reign, bottomless checkbook, etc. And you circled the guy that you thought was best suited for the job. We had late kick last night, and our stats and info department came to me with a stat that's crazy. So listen to this. Out of the top 100 recruits they've ever landed, 26 of them are on the roster right now. Out of the top 10 recruits all time they've landed, 5 of the top 10 are on the roster right now. And that's after they lost a bunch of kids this last cycle. So talent's not the issue. Certainly fan engagement and passion, money, none of that's the issue. It's on Jimbo Fisher.
So we knew Anthony Richardson was going to be the talk of the combine. I feel like South Carolina is going to climb the ladder and get the buzz that Kentucky received a year ago. Am I crazy for that? And if it's a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen, what should be the warning sign for fans this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Arkansas had a lot of that last year. I know because I contributed healthily to that wave.
We did
momentum.
too.
Yeah, we loved him.
So the way that works, by the way, using the mock draft world analogy is Arkansas is a bust. It wasn't our fault. They were just a bust.
Right.
That's how that works. I think South Carolina will have that, and with good reason. They've overachieved 2 years in a row. You just start to get into this a little more rarefied air now, where the expectation kind of starts at 9 wins. And if you're Alabama, that's nothing. If you're Georgia, that's nothing. You're South Carolina, you're starting the expectation meter in the 8.5 or 9 win range. That is totally inverting the model. And it wasn't too long ago. I mean, we're talking about in the last 12 to 24 months where it looked like they were in the wilderness in their own state. No one saw that win against Clemson coming the way it did. And it was on the road in Death Valley, and they had already gotten a big win against Tennessee. I thought that South Carolina had completed the successful portion of their season. Then they just go beat Clemson. And so what did you do there? You accomplished something, but then you get the consequences of that success. And now all of a sudden, people think that you start where you left off last year, and that's not the case. You start from scratch every year. You don't start with the beginning point of, all right, well, we'll beat Clemson again this year. We'll win at least 8 games this year. Now, what will we stack on top of that? You got to start over every year. And Spencer Rattler's got to be a really good quarterback. And you got to replace some of these guys you lost in the portal. And your line of scrimmage talent has got to upgrade. And your perimeter skill talent has got to elevate to a different level. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we could watch in spring. And you start to get the whispers and rumblings in fall camp. They still got a ways to go. It's just, I think they're ahead of schedule in that journey.
Best interview from Indianapolis and why?
Keon White is a player from Georgia Tech. And Keon White fascinated me because he's a microcosm of how inexact the recruiting industry is. This is a guy who comes out of high school. He's like 6'5", 220. And he's a tight end. He's a 2-star tight end, and he goes to Old Dominion. Now, fast forward, he is a 6'5", 285-pound edge rusher being mock drafted in the first round. And you could look at him one of two ways. You can either say, ooh, the recruiting industry whiffed on him, or you could say there is no metric out there that foresees an 80 or 70-pound weight gain and position change coming at the college level. That just, it is a case study of how physical and mental maturation is sometimes very much ongoing. It is in the process of happening when you come out of high school. And he was really open about it. Like he said, man, I was a 2-star out of high school, but he wasn't saying it like I had this massive chip on my shoulder. He was almost saying it like, can you believe I weigh 280 pounds now? This is crazy. So he's a really good dude to talk to. And then we got all the big names through there. CJ Stroud was really good. I know he got caught a lot of flack for his favorite player comps, but otherwise, other than the Mike Vick, Deshaun Watson comment, I thought he was really insightful, really open, really honest. Most of those guys were. Levis came in there and wasn't even wearing socks. He was just wearing sandals. That stood out to me as well.
Straight from the shower or the sauna for Will Levis. Josh Pate has been our guest, host of Late Kick Live, 24/7 Sports and CBS for their college football coverage. Always great. Check him out tonight at the channel on YouTube. Josh, thank you, man, so much for the time as always.
I appreciate it, guys.
All right. There's Pate State. Josh Pate has been our guest. Coming up, we head to the story with the Washington Commanders. To sell or not to sell? That's the question. We all wait on Daniel Snyder's answer. But Front Office Sports has been following this very closely. A.J. Perez joins us next with the very latest. And his report on Friday prompted the Commanders to issue a late-night statement on Friday evening. That's next on Outkick 360.
There are 7 levels to effort for a pitcher to get ready for the season. And by that, I mean each level that you step up, the effort level intensifies, increases. And you can't replicate one level before you get there because it just, psychologically, it's just impossible to do. But that first level is when you start throwing. The second level is when you get to the mound for the first time and throw your first bullpen. The third level is going into spring training and throwing that first bullpen in spring training. That's just a different level of effort. Then you have batting practice, which is another level. And then you go to live hitters. And then you go to a spring training game. And during that spring training game, during spring training, there's an increase in effort based on pitch counts as you increase through spring training, get ready for opening day. And finally, 7 is opening day. That final day is opening day when you can't replicate that effort. And the reason I point these out is each level is where you'll find a pitcher getting hurt if a pitcher gets hurt. Moving up a level is a degree of intensity. Like I said, you can't replicate it until you get there. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the WBC is day 7 of that program. There is the stadiums will be full. You're competing for something against guys who no one may know, but guys who are trying to win a job in spring training, trying to make a name or help their country win and all the things that go with that. But you're going from basically where these guys will be is level 4 or 5 or 6 to level 7. And I mention that again for this reason. If we back up to 2017, I'm going to throw some names out there. Felix Hernandez had 2 long DL stints after pitching in the WBC, went on with a shoulder injury in April, and then in August, bicep tendonitis, missed a couple months of the season. Sam Dyson who was the Rangers closer in 2016, started the year, had a 10.8 ERA in 17 appearances, and was designated for assignment and done. Danny Duffy, lefty for the Royals, power arm, had multiple stints on the DL after a phenomenal 2016, and only threw 146 innings after a great 2016. Seth Lugo of the A's tore his UCL during the season after throwing 15 innings in the WBC. Urias Familia of the Mets had an arterial collateral clot in his shoulder, didn't come back till August. Edison Volquez of the Marlins threw a no-hitter in June, but we had Tommy John surgery on August 4th. That's just 7 guys. And as a fan, as an organization, I honestly would try and avoid having any of my pitchers ever go, just because I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I don't see anything positive. And here's the other thing, too. If you think about spring training from March 1st to March 29th this year, because opening day is the 30th, that's 29. We'll say there's 30 days in spring training, 30 days of games. The 8th to the 21st takes 13 days out of that, which means you have 17 days as a starting pitcher to get ready for spring training, to get ready for opening day, which means you're probably talking 4 starts. And you're going from 2 innings in a back B field game to start the camp to full stadium, packed house, live competition, and then dialing it back down as you come back to spring training. I just find that to be something, and I was a guy who I always shot to have 30 to 32 innings in spring training, with my second to last start being 100 pitches, where I could get 7 or 8 innings out, because I wanted to be ready to go opening day to throw a complete game. I didn't want pitch count to be a factor. And then my last start, I'd throw a 50 or 60 pitch tune-up. They don't have the luxury of doing those things, given what they're being thrown into. And I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out, if you're a fan, if you're a fantasy owner, or if you're someone who bets the games, I would have a lot of trouble putting money around guys in the WBC that pitch for any length of time coming up this year.
Outkick 360. Glad you're with us across the Outkick Network. 6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. AJ Perez joins us from Front Office Sports, a senior reporter at the great site that prompted a late-night statement from the Washington Commanders on Friday. I took a screenshot. I'm like, this is interesting, because I haven't seen the statement from the Commanders on a previous report and revolving around Daniel Snyder blocking Jeff Bezos. And now it seems we're at a stalemate on whether or not Snyder's going to sell the franchise.
I feel like you've done your job as a reporter whenever you prompt a late-night statement from a team. And that's what our next guest has done.
AJ has done that. AJ, thank you for the time. And when you saw it, we're showing the statement from the Commanders now, but they specifically mentioned Front Office Sports tonight posted a blatantly false report regarding the ongoing process involving a potential Commanders transaction. And it goes on to go through some other things that they get into on the quote-unquote transaction. But what do you think when the Commanders released the late-night Friday statement?
Man, I was on my couch watching a movie with my wife, and I'm like, "Whoa, okay, I got to work again." I had to text that to our CEO, our CFO, and my editor, and that was the third statement off of a report last week. The first one was the Washington Post report last Monday night that was on the indemnification, what Dan Snyder looking to the league to cover his potential any kind of fines or anything out of these investigations that are ongoing. Second one was a little more muted the next day when ESPN reported on more information on the subpoena that we reported on days prior about the federal investigation and what they were looking at, including issues over a $55 million line of credit. So that was more of a muted statement. Then we got that one, which was on letterhead because this is my analysis. I have no sources on this, but someone asked me on Monday after after the Washington Post story came out and asked if it was on letterhead. And I responded on Twitter, no letterhead. And I got a text from somebody at the Commanders within 10 minutes about that tweet. So mine was on letterhead. So that was interesting.
Was the movie that was interrupted any good that you were watching with your wife?
Oh man, it was all right. We had a pause it for 30 minutes. I can't remember what it was. We watched a couple movies since. It was some Netflix movie. Can't remember off the top of my head if what that one was.
Let's go back a little bit on all this, because the number one question we always get when talking about this story, AJ, is, well, how can someone make you sell something that you own? And someone brought up the analogy of, what if your homeowners association came in and said, Chad, you got to sell your home. We're making you sell it. And my response was, well, if I signed something with a homeowners association that locked me in to something where they could vote me out, I would be mad at myself. So can you kind of take us through the charter with the NFL and what can happen here where someone is forced to sell? So
it doesn't matter who you are in the NFL, whether you're a player and a team employee, league employee, or team owner. You're the whole conduct detrimental. Yeah, you're subject to it, no matter who you are. And when you become an owner, you sign, basically you sign the agreement, you sign all the paperwork with the NFL that puts you, that's spelled out under the league bylaws, which I covered today. And I'm not saying it's the most interesting thing in the world to read, but I took my readers through today about 1,000 words of, my story's about 1,000 words too, but how the process works. It's never been used before. Because while other leagues like in Major League Baseball with Frank McCourt and Marge Schott, and NBA obviously with the Clipper situation with Sterling, and obviously Ballmer bought the team. It has been used in other sports and not the NFL, and there's some details on how it would work. There's also a lot of questions, and I kind of delved into that today. Where this is why it's really never been used. It's very, very onerous. There's a pretty high standard to throw somebody out because, I've been told this by owners and everybody else around the league for the last several months, many months before the sale was announced in November. They don't want to set a precedent because they don't want it to boomerang on them, because these franchises are supposed to be held for generations. This will be passed down. Goodell's one of his mandates a few years ago, he wants to solidify the succession plan for a team to avoid what nearly happened in New Orleans with the Saints and what did happen with the Denver Broncos. They want this to be as seamless as possible, and they don't want to complicate it by throwing out owners every few years. Where these teams are worth so much money. That's pretty much it. This is why one of the reasons why this is dragging out is because of those bylaws and the 30% rule, where you have to have 30% liquid, basically 30% cash, as part of a purchase when you buy an NFL team. That's another reason this is dragged out.
AJ Perez, our guest from Front Office Sports. So this feels like someone that is a typical leadership role where you're trying to get someone to do something, but you make it their idea, and then they end up doing it. Whoever Daniel Snyder sells it to, the NFL collectively, the owners, want it to be as though it was Dan Snyder's idea, and he certainly doesn't feel that with Bezos. Who else is in on the bidding, and what's the best offer that you've heard of, reported on, that they've actually received versus what he wants?
Yeah, this process is still ongoing, and there's been not a lot of news coming from the team. Although in that statement, we got the word transaction, which was kind of the new one. So what it looks like, it's headed to at least a majority, if not a full sale of Dan Snyder. He basically owns the entire team. Maybe a small percent is held by others within his family. So he has control over this process. He can take as long as he wants. Though I reported last Monday before a lot of these other reports came out that the other owners were getting kind of antsy. They were kind of like, "What's taking so long?" And this comes over the last many months before the sale even was announced, a potential sale. there were owners, there were people going to, Snyder trying to, hey, we don't want to do the removal process. How about you, think about selling the team, explore the sale, figure something out. Because there's been so much noise, and along with the team obviously not having a lot of success over the last nearly 24 years as owner. There's been complicated by the scandals, and obviously the Washington Post reporting a lot of them is why Jeff Bezos is kind of not, he's been held at arm's length so far as we know, and he has been in on the process. So the two names, the highest bid that we know was Washington Post reported about 10 days ago reported Tillman Fertitta, the Houston Rockets owner, bid around $5.5 billion. That was the highest bid we have with a name attached to it. The other one is Josh Harris, and he's the owner of the Sixers and and the Devils in the NHL. So those are the two names that we know that are non-Bezos that have been involved in this process. Josh Harris has been involved in the process a long time. We know with 100% certainty through my sources and through The Athletic that he was one of the handful of potential owners who took a tour over here in Ashburn of the team headquarters. And it's also thought that Tillman Fertitta also toured the facility as well. We just don't have that. We don't have that confirmed.
Imagine having 30% of $5.5 billion in an account somewhere to show the NFL that you're that liquid that you can make that happen. AJ Perez from Front Office Sports is our guest on Outkick 360. We always hear about, with Bezos, obviously Snyder doesn't want to sell to him, but we always hear about guys or owners that leagues don't want to be in the club and don't want to be in the league. Is there someone out there that through your reporting, AJ, that you continually hear that the NFL wants to get into their club, that they want this person to eventually be an owner of a club?
Yeah, Robert Kraft, probably about 3 weeks ago, Robert Kraft said some really nice things about Bezos. I think overall, what I'm hearing from the owners I talk to and others around the league is that Jeff Bezos would be welcomed in. It is hard to become an NFL owner. It isn't easy. Not only do you have to make a ton of money and have a ton of money in the bank, like you said, having that 1.5 to $2 billion sitting around in your checking account for that 30%. Not that it really happens. That's why you have to divest certain things, and no one has that much cash, no matter how rich you are. But it's not just that. It's like who they feel comfortable with and and we saw that play out with the Carolina Panthers when Dave Tepper was my sources, and I've heard this I've seen it reported elsewhere, where he wasn't the highest bidder, but they felt he was the most straightforward because he had the resources, he had the cash. There's always questions about not only buying the team, but this team's going to need another at least $2 to $3 billion toward a new stadium, and probably closer to $3 to $4 billion, because they need a new stadium. FedEx is outdated. There's you could build a stadium next to that one. That's the easiest route. But RFK, getting back to where they were back in the glory days of the team, that's where everybody wants. And to get there, that's going to be a big chunk of change, and probably no public financing of that. And even in Maryland or Virginia, public financing is going to be a stretch. Obviously, a change of ownership would help that effort.
When the owner of the Seahawks, Paul Allen, passed away, it went to his trust, but all of his money, not all, practically all, is going to be donated to charity through his will. They're going to end up selling the Seattle Seahawks after a certain amount of time. Many think it's next year. Whatever happens in Washington is going to benefit ownership, because that will be the new bar. And Bezos, hypothetically, theoretically, he's already going to go through the gauntlet of the background check that the NFL does, and he's going to be already included in that. So I would think he's totally fine if he just wants a franchise. He's totally fine going through all of the details now to get in the mix for that franchise. Now, if he wants Washington, it's a different story.
Definitely, yeah. There's the barriers for him if Seattle goes on the market in the next couple of years, way less. I mean, you're going to have somebody with even stronger ties to the Seattle area where Amazon was founded, to where here, while Bezos owns the Washington Post, he has a huge house in DC, one of the most expensive houses in the district, and the second headquarters, or HQ2 for Amazon, even though he's no longer the CEO, is right across the Potomac in Virginia. So he has ties to both, but going, it'd be a much more straightforward path, and you don't need a new stadium right away in Seattle. They're pretty well set, so you don't have to worry about that. This franchise is kind of like, you can see it as a fixer upper. It's was a top 5 franchise, maybe in top 3 franchise when he bought it. Revenue streams were great. Now we've seen the stadium shrink by about 20,000 during his time as ownership. They've put tarps over a lot of the seats in the upper deck, and attendance has declined. Other revenue has also declined. There's a lot of work to do here, but this is the NFL, needs DC to succeed. Wants it to succeed, because it's right now it's kind of languished.
So do you think Bezos is winning in this no matter what, right? Because of who he is and the money that he has and everything else. But is there a scenario where he views winning as being blocked in some way by Daniel Snyder and ultimately getting what he covets all along, which is the Seattle Seahawks instead of the Washington Commanders?
Yeah, it's looking more that way. I mean, there's been reports the last couple of weeks about, really heating up the reports about Dan Snyder does not want to sell to Bezos. And my sources said that I haven't used the word blocked or barred like others have, but I've used reluctance. There's a very strong reluctance, and there's people around the league, some other owners especially, that are trying to, broker a deal. But I don't even, at this point, I think we're going to see most likely somebody besides Bezos, the way I've seen, these reports come out, including today by Matthew Berry over at NBC Sports. I think it's just headed that way. There's so much reluctance towards Bezos that it's probably going to, go to somebody else unless things change. Bezos hired the banking firm Allen & Company, which handled the last 2 NFL transactions for the Broncos and also for the Carolina Panthers, to help him. But even that, it seems like it's treading towards somebody besides Jeff Bezos at this point.
AJ Perez, Front Office Sports, with us. Switching gears, we were talking earlier of Charlie Gasparino's report on Fox Business of Adam Silver in the mix. He's on a very short list of 3 to take over for Bob Iger at Disney whenever he steps down and retires 2 years from now. Can you help us connect the dots with the NBA commissioner, and now he would head up the world's largest media company?
Yeah, this all goes back to why Bob Iger left and returned like he did. Bob Chapek was, he didn't really develop his successor. So Bob Chapek was brought in from the theme park side. And that really didn't really work out. A lot of when you have a media business, when you have multiple streaming services between Hulu, ESPN Plus, and Disney Plus, you need somebody that on the entertainment side. And obviously, that the NBA with Silver, it's a very interesting, very interesting prospect. And we don't know when Bob Iger is going to retire again, step away again. But there's Doug Greenberg, my coworker, was able to verify that. And there is interest there, and it's going to be. It's kind of a little early, I think, because Bob Iger is probably going to be around for a few more months, several more months. But he needs to get that, that next guy lined up, and he's going to be a little more hands-on this time in picking and developing that next candidate.
I find it interesting. We see often now, especially in college football and the conferences, they're going more to the media guys who have been running companies to come in and run sports. I'm surprised.
This would be the opposite.
The exact opposite.
Yeah.
That's why I find it intriguing that they're going to the NBA commissioner as one of 3 names mentioned. One of the other ones is internal, I believe, and the other one's actually in media and movies and film.
But as you guys cover, AJ, it's all kind of the same, right? Entertainment and sports.
Yeah.
If you're running one, it's all about getting eyeballs for both sides.
Yeah, because right now it's like we're within a couple of years, the NBA contracts can be up with ESPN and Turner, and a lot of talk about NBC wanting to come back into the fold. It's going to be, the NBA is going to be fine. It's obviously Silver's probably arguably the best commissioner in pro sports right now. So it's going to be hard to replace him, but it's, live sports programming is still in demand and will be demand for several more years, especially for broadcast. They're still going to command top dollar. Now, will that change? Like the NFL contracts are up in 10 years. What will it look like then? What will the media market look like then? We're already seeing the streaming take over, Thursday Night Football being the exclusive home of on Amazon. So we could be heading more streaming, obviously, but this live sports programming for broadcast TV and for cable is still a major draw.
AJ, based on the information you have, just tying back in with Washington, either way, he either sells it on his own or he's forced to sell and he's voted out. Either way, we're looking at an owner in Daniel Snyder who's going to get $5.5 to $7 billion. Do you think he's the owner by September, by the time the kickoff happens for the Commanders, or do you think we actually get down a path where Snyder's no longer a part of the NFL storyline?
I think if it goes in more than a couple more months, I think the actual move towards removal will start, and it's not an easy one. It's not the one the NFL owners want to do. It's not the one Goodell wants to do. They want Snyder to come up with his own success, with the next owner himself, take a bid, make sure, there's always a possibility if Bezos for some reason comes in, we know there's a bid for let's say $7 billion hypothetically. Right. And he sells to one of the others, Fertitta, Harris, or somebody else we don't know at this point, for like $6.2 billion, $8 billion difference. Sorry, $800 million difference, which is hard to imagine. But yeah, that they could actually, the owners could actually vote that down, and then we're starting back at square one. That's very unlikely. I think they're gonna, there's not going to be a big disparity in the bids, and if there is, as long as it's not a huge one, I'm not going to sail through, but it's going to be examined by the NFL Finance Committee. It's going to be voted on. It takes 24 votes to approve, just like it takes 24 votes to remove. So, and they're going to go from there.
AJ, great stuff, man. We're referencing the site quite a bit, the emails and all that, with all the breaking news from the business side of this. This is something to follow. I think we know change is happening. I think it's going to be on Snyder's terms. I may be wrong, but I think the owners don't want to set a precedent of getting voted out themselves, especially the guy negotiating with Snyder, who's Jerry Jones. There you go. AJ, appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, AJ Perez, Front Office Sports senior reporter, and he's been covering this a lot with the Commanders and back and forth. And again, Washington, the franchise, released a statement based on a report from AJ Perez. Chad, I don't know if any statements were made from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but there was a brawl, WWE style, but better in the XFL.
Someone made a statement, just not The Rock.
Message was sent.
Yeah. For once, it wasn't The Rock making a statement. Someone else.
That's next on Outkick 360.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, whoa, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Come on, live a little.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper rational. They looked at the data and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, the bold taste of a Southern legend.
A.J. McCarron is playing in the XFL, believe it or not. He was really upset with the officials post-game as the St. Louis Battlehawks took on the D.C. Defenders on Sunday. Outkick 360 rolls on. So McCarron dropped back in the pocket. He was sacked on the play, and it was a game that had been chippy throughout the entire game. And then all hell broke loose. The story's at Outkick.com. Players from both teams converged on each other, started pushing, shoving, punching, scratching. It was not just a little scuffle. It was a full-blown melee with haymakers flying and then a helmet that was just launched to the moon, as we can see right here on our live streaming coverage from D Loves Sports. Yeah, quite the fight that you don't. This trumps anything I've seen in training camp with some of the fists that were thrown with helmets off, ripped off first.
My favorite part of the fight when you watch the ESPN broadcast is whoever's calling it says, this is not what the XFL is about. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, it is.
It's about anything we want it to be.
You're run by a wrestler. Like, this is great. I'm watching, I'm thinking, if it's not what the XFL is about, it should be about this. This is the most I've been interested in the XFL so far was this brawl. It was so funny. Like, they were appalled by what was going on. This is not what this league is about. I'm thinking, no, you need The Undertaker and Kane and The Rock to reunite on that field right now and start rock bottoming people left and right.
Tombstone to hell.
That's what I'll watch. I mean, this was terrific. This is absolutely what the league needs to be about.
The walls of Jericho put on A.J. McCarron.
Break the wall down. Need all those guys back out at this.
So can
you imagine if Chris Jericho was one of the coaches?
He had different WWE guys. And it's not far.
Val Venus coaches DC Defenders.
I don't know how many people nowadays look at The Rock as a wrestler anymore. But even if
he'll always be a wrestler to me.
If you don't, it was still owned by Vince McMahon, not once but twice. And then it folded, and then The Rock purchased it. 2 DC players ejected, one for picking up a penalty flag and throwing it back, and then the St. Louis player who threw the helmet.
I just laughed. Look, this is no criticism of the brawl. I thought it was entertaining. And everything that happened. It's funny that this is not at all what we're going to be about here at the XFL.
But here's the thing, though.
It's what you're about. It's what you should be about.
So USFL, the hub is in Birmingham in year 1, right? Everyone plays in Birmingham. In the XFL, you're in Dallas. That's your hub. That's the headquarters. And then you fly to your cities, the host sites. So both of these teams, after that brawl, had to get on the same plane and fly back to Dallas. And that also sounds very WWE to me.
Yes. They need to get film of that. Them talking trash
Baby
to each other.
faces in the front, Hills in the back.
Yeah. Okay, all DC Defenders, please. You're going to be rows 1 through 40. And then the St. Louis Battlehawks will be in the back of the plane. Just terrific. I love it. Need more of that.
Chad, I saw the headline today. Jay Wright is going to be on the CBS broadcast for the NCAA tournament, starting with the selection show. I love this.
Yeah.
Love this.
He's going to be, I'm sure, part of the studio also with all those guys on Turner.
Yeah.
And CBS. So Jay Wright, first off, should still be coaching somewhere.
I agree.
And he's maybe, certainly top 3 of our lifetime, probably, in terms of head coaches.
I mean,
and what he did at Villanova, multiple national championships.
With him there, they're a blue blood.
Yeah.
Now.
And they certainly weren't before. I mean, they'd won a national championship before, won. But he's one of the best. Great on television, knew that when he was coaching also. So this is good news for coverage of the NCAA tournament. This week, to me, Hutton, is all about every night we're going to have multiple automatic qualifier, tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Where someone's going to win. That's what this week is about. It gets fun when the bigger conference tournaments start to watch some of those bubble teams try to play their way in. But I love this week for all of those. This is where March Madness starts to me. Those teams trying to win their way in.
And in some cases, you have to win. You're right. Win the
and
whole
it's already
tournament.
started. I think there's been 5 teams already.
Win the whole tournament.
Punch their ticket.
By the way, we were tipped off to go ahead and bet Drake in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
We have an insider who said, bet Drake. It's going to be an 8-9 game. And they'll win the 8-9 game. And my response was, Hutton, that I always take Drake.
Always.
It's one of my rules. If Drake's in the tournament, I'm taking them to win.
Ole Miss and South Carolina will tip off the SEC tournament, which will be right here, a block and a half from where we sit right now in Nashville. Wednesday's the start of the SEC tournament with Ole Miss, South Carolina, LSU, and Georgia. But the real focus should be on the Thursday matchups that includes Tennessee, includes Auburn, Vandy, who's been red hot, lost 1 game since February. Mississippi State and Florida as well. Chad, this is a very wide open SEC tournament that we're about to watch.
For sure. And look, to me, the most interesting couple teams there's really 3 right now you could say are on the bubble or close to it in the SEC. Mississippi State, Auburn, Vanderbilt. Vandy's the one with the most work to do. If they avoid disaster and don't lose to LSU or Georgia, and if they can beat Kentucky on Friday, it's going to be interesting come Selection Sunday. And I think if they beat A&M the next day, they're in. based on what happens around them. A couple things may have to break their way, but if they can do that, they're probably going to get in. Auburn, I think, is probably in regardless. Mississippi State may have some work to do. They have to avoid the awful loss for sure.
And the thing I can't get away from is I believe the vast majority of the committee members already have their mind made up on these teams before they even tip off unless they win the tournament.
There's a bracket that exists somewhere right now that's already filled out.
And I hate that because these games matter. At least I want them to.
Yeah.
So much. Back at it tomorrow, 3 o'clock
The
Eastern.
show matters.
Right here on the Outkick Network for Outkick 360.